Okay, so this is just, I have 2 points of interesting research I want to delve into here. So the next thing that I want to explore is the entities people encounter during an NDE. Among all the experiencers in my research, almost 90% of them say they encountered some kind of divine or godlike being during a near-death experience. The light was emanating from a being that was giving off a very brilliant light as part of his essence. He was beautiful to look at and projected the feelings of unconditional love and peace. I could not take my attention from the light being. I felt completely surrounded and taken up in an indescribable, warm, and loving omnipresence of light, direct, unimpeded transference of thought, more like a shared knowingness, was washing through every cell of my being. It was me, and it was not me. I was it, and I was not it. I was in it, of it, yet still simultaneously my unique individual beingness. I knew in that moment, for all time, that I was a unique atom aspect of this wondrous being. Is the being of light actually the personified higher self? Because they describe it exactly as I described mine that I witnessed through my third person vantage. It was not me, but the intuitive me, fully personified. My awareness is a fragment of its awareness. I feel my own higher self in people's description of the divine being. It is exactly the entity I witnessed in my first contact event. My own higher self wants me to share in this presentation that I know people are witnessing their own higher self as the divine being of light. So, how could this be? Let's talk a bit about the mind and projection. The traditional view of our sensory and visual experience is that all mental activity is nothing but brain activity. Everything you're seeing is inside your head. But there are some, such as biologist Dr. Rupert Sheldrake, that believe the images you see of the world around you are in your mind and produced by your mind and then projected out. Vision is a two-way process, light coming in and the outward projection of images. The whole visual experience of the world is therefore projected out from our minds. A simple example is pareidolia, where you can see images of your subconscious on random patterns, like seeing a rhinoceros in the clouds. If you have insecurities, you can project your feelings of inadequacy onto other people's behavior. There are also experiments in gaze detection, and found that one survey, 94% of people felt eyes staring at them and turned around, and indeed they were being watched. And in some cases, they were through buildings. You'd be in one building with the window and another person in another building, and they could detect being watched, meaning there was no other types of cues possible. So people can sense when they're being watched. And it's also why visioning works. You're projecting the reality you desire outwards. Projection is one of the commonest psychic phenomena. Everything that is unconscious in ourselves, we discover in our neighbor, and we treat him accordingly. Carl Jung. So Michael Newberg found that in the afterlife, we are also recreating familiar places we have lived or visited on Earth. An unforgotten home, school, garden, mountain, or seashore. When the mind is in the higher frequencies of the near-death dimension, it continues to do what it does best, translate those frequencies into a world of appearances. Dr. Elizabeth Fensky, a clinical psychologist, announced that she too believes that the landscapes, flowers, physical structures, and so forth of the afterlife dimension are fashioned out of interacting thought patterns. I think we're coming to the point in NDE research where it's difficult to make a distinction between thought and light. So the point is that we are caught in a mental matrix of projection with our mind that naturally projects outwards our reality. When you are not aware of the higher self's existence, you don't experience it within you. You project it outside as another force. When you can't embody the grandness of being God that you have, that's what the higher self is, merged in the God field. So when you can't embody that, either because you don't believe you are that, or you haven't yet experienced it, then the higher self, the aspect of you that is connected to God, becomes an outward experience of God. When you know exactly the power you are, that you are the source, the mover of the physical world, then you embody the higher self, the portion of you that is the aware individuation of God. This is the play. So here's my breakdown of this: the God qualities, the source qualities. omnipotent, which is all powerful, omniscient, which is all knowing, omnipresent, which is present everywhere. And so this is how it translates to you: omnipotent, all powerful, which is visioning, the ability to manipulate the physical universe; omniscient, all knowing, which is intuitive, which is the tuning into of information through light and sound; omnipresent, which is present everywhere, which is remote viewing across time and space. So when you can't embody these qualities, when you don't experience them to be yourself, then you project outwards your experience of God. You can only embody what you know you are, and you project out what you can't embody. So, among all the experiencers in the research who described meeting a divine or godlike being in their NDEs, one third identified the being as an entity consistent with their religious beliefs, while double that number, two-thirds, say they could not identify the godlike being. This combining of deities from different traditions suggests that the images were formed partly in their own creative imagination. The divine beings encountered may have appeared as images taken from their mind, so they would be familiar. I could see white, heavy, flapping robes of Jesus Christ, and I knew that was my destination. I don't believe in Jesus Christ, so I remember being confused. I had grown up with a Catholic father and a Methodist mother and was trained in both religions. When I was quite young, I made the decision that I didn't believe in Christ or the Trinity. I couldn't understand why I was being led up to Christ because I didn't believe in him. This might be my favorite. In front of me was a figure in white robes and long sleeves. He had long hair and a long bushy beard. I saw the folds of his robe and his beard in great detail. I woke up and told my wife that Gandalf was in charge. The figure that I envisioned looked like Gandalf in Lord of the Rings. I just love that. Experiencers attempting to talk about their encounter with the divine in their NDEs use a variety of labels, such as God, Buddha, Brahma, Krishna, Allah, Source, all that is. And many of the experiencers themselves acknowledge that these labels should not necessarily be taken literally, but represent their brain's attempt to make sense of something they experienced that was beyond words. The other consistency the other consistency in almost all these NDE accounts is that they generally view the divinity they encountered, even if they experienced themselves as being part of it, as something far greater than themselves. Unity and divinity is the key. And here's why. When you reject divinity in life, you have an unpleasant experience in the afterlife. One case of an NDE reported that peace and joy, so it wasn't just God or something, it was peace and joy, made the experiencer uncomfortable. So his body was sent to an isolated space in the universe where he just existed in blackness. Stunned and shocked, he then called out to his sister. Then a light shone from above, and he was told he had to go back because he hadn't completed his life. The research demonstrates the importance of divinity in one's life. So this is one of the big keys, I think. Which particular features of near-death experiences are associated with changes in death attitudes? In a sample of more than 400 people who had NDEs, meeting some kind of divine or godlike being was associated with increased acceptance of death and with decreased fear of death and decreased death anxiety. Meeting deceased loved ones, seeing a brilliant light, and feelings of joy in the NDE were also associated with acceptance of death, and a feeling of being one with the universe was also associated with decreased death anxiety. To my surprise, a sense of leaving the body was not significantly associated with death attitudes. I had expected that an experience of being free from the body would reduce people's fear of death, and other researchers had guessed this also, but this did not seem to be the case. For me, this is huge. This is such big and amazing research that, for me, points out the whole kind of bigger part of this, that it's actually about divinity. And then that's the thing that we're looking forward to embody in this life. Whatever that means for you, too. With unity and divinity, you get outside the mind by transcending oneself while losing the fear of death. And by the way, I want to say this, with unity and divinity, you get outside the mind matrix creator, the mental matrix creator going on here, the projector. Unity and divinity evolve consciousness.